Hello and welcome back, Copic in the Craft Room fans. I am bringing another stamp set by Dare to be Artsy to you today, and I have stamped it already. This paper that I'm using again this week is from the sketchbooks that Imagination International is just going to be starting to carry. Next month, I'll be featuring them on my blog and talking more about this paper, but it's a little bit more lightweight than the Copic, the Express It blending card or the Nina cardstock. It really does blend really very smoothly, nicely. Like all the other papers, it bleeds through, but that's not unusual for Copic. It's kind of part of the game. But I've got this great set. This is called Raggity Rabbit, and then I've also stamped it in the Dare to be Artsy Premium Ink, Totally Black Archival Hybrid Ink. So that's already done. The reason I picked this stamp set, and I am going to turn this into a card, but I wanted to share this because I'm not sure why, but I felt like it was necessary. I picked out this stamp set. It's really sweet. Little rabbit, some little sayings about Easter, and if you ever need to talk, I'm all ears. So they veered away just from the Easter piece to add some other pieces. But the quote that I picked out is, "Everything that is real was first imagined," from the Velveteen Rabbit. And obviously there's a personal backstory here. My youngest daughter has an Eeyore, so not a rabbit, but an Eeyore that has been loved almost into destruction. And that Eeyore to her is as real as it comes. And of course at this point she's 12 and it's still right there. And to some extent, I've handed that down to her because I have a Winnie the Pooh that is the same. So this statement, at least for our family, is true. And so it really spoke to me personally. I have not done scrapbooking in a long time, unfortunately, but this is a stamp that would fit into my scrapbooking life extremely well from the past. So I love the sentiment. I love the fact that they've done a nice job adding other little sentiments that make this a more versatile stamp than what it first appears. You have that Easter aspect, but also just some friendship pieces, and then this very sweet quote from the Velveteen Rabbit. So that's what I have to say about that. We are gonna zoom in, we're gonna do some Copic coloring, and I am gonna do the background this time. I'm gonna try kind of a wash effect. We'll see how that works. As you know, it's always a little bit of an experiment as I start coloring. So I'm keeping the colors on this very, very neutral, and the bunny's gonna be done in a series of E4s. So I'm starting with E4-1 and getting that nice base coat. I do use typically small circles. I'm using my brush nib in this case. E4-2 is next, and I'm flicking color up from the base, creating that rounded shape from under the face of the bunny, around the edge, bottom edge, and a little bit the top edge of the ear. E4-4 is next, considerably darker, so I'm really focusing this into the areas that I believe are going to be shadowed. Bottom edge of the ear, kind of the inner bottom edge, under the chin, under the body. E4-7 is last, and this only goes in a few kind of key areas that I think are going to be extremely dark. E4-3 is actually coming back to soften that area between the E4-4 and the E4-2. It was pretty harsh. I'm keeping this coloring loose. It's not getting blended smoothly, but I want to show the texture on this fuzzy bunny. E4-1, it's a well-loved stuffed friend, so I want to make sure it looks a little raggedy. V9-1 is going to give touches of kind of that dusty violet color. V9-3 and V9-5 come in as well on the ears and heart, and V9-1 to soften. I'm using the colorless blender now all over that little sentiment, and then V9-1, V9-3 towards the center, and just a touch of V9-5 right on top of those words. I'm softening the edges with that colorless blender. Now I'm going to go back and forth pretty fast with the V9-1 and the colorless blender. So I'm going to fade out from the edge of the bunny, kind of flick outward onto the colorless blender that I've laid down, and then I come back with the colorless blender at the edges and soften that again. So I lay down the colorless blender first, then the color, and then soften the edge again with the colorless blender. And then I'm putting a little shadow underneath him with the V9-5. Then I'm going to start playing with a card. Now, I did not measure this image before I started, before I stamped it. And so it is a little large. I had to go with a bigger card size. And then I am going to have to do some fudging around, which I usually do when I start putting my card together. So I'm finding all my papers, getting those layers on. I realized right away that a standard card base is not going to work, that I'm going to need to go to a larger size. So I grabbed some different papers and supplies. I'm probably running to my scrap room here, grabbing that card base. This one is actually going to be like 5 1/4 by 5 1/4. I have found a really hard time getting larger envelopes. So I know I can get 5 1/2 inch ones. So that's about what I usually do with a square card. Round up those corners. I'm going to add some of the Express It double-sided tape on the back and get that stuck down. And I actually sometimes will do this where I just stick it on the paper and then trim it down to that. I'm not much for measuring on many things. I'm just not that precise, to be honest. Putting foam back on the back of that pattern paper and on the back of this cute burlap flower, and then taping kind of that bottom layer of pattern paper and then foam squares on top. And I have some measurement issues that I'm going to correct, and voila, it fits, and I got a card. One card ready to go. I obviously had some issues with sizing. I skipped a lot of that, but a classic Michelle revamp, pulling everything apart and putting it back together. I do have a little bit of a crease down one side of my image now from doing that. The focus is the image, which is always what I would like it to be, with the card being kind of secondary, keeping it really simple. You could add some stitching, which would be perfect for the sentiment around the edge, or even in just some small spots. And I might come back and add some twine in some of these places to just add that detail of that stitching and that thought of something being real and made. So that is this week's image. Thank you, Dare to Be Artsy, for the beautiful stamp and the great ink. If you have not done this yet, we would greatly appreciate your support by clicking like on our YouTube channel for Copic in the Craft Room, and also liking this video. If you also have not seen it yet, please join us over at our Facebook page at Copic in the Craft Room, where we have also photo tutorials and blog links and all sorts of Copic inspiration for you each and every week. I just thank you for joining me this week and hope you have a happy, colorful week.